Hey everybody, and Tony here with a review of Sausage Party, which I saw at the CineStar movie theaters at Potsdamer Platz. The film was directed by Conrad Vernon and Greg Tiernan. It was produced by Conrad Vernon, Megan Ellison, Seth Rogen, and Evan Goldberg. It was written by Kyle Hunter, Seth Rogen, Evan Goldberg, Ariel Shafir, and Jonah Hill. The music was composed by Alan Menken and Christopher Lennertz. It was edited by Kevin Pavlovitz, and it starred the vocal talents of Seth Rogen, Kristen Wiig, Michael Cera, Bill Hader, Scott Diggs Underwood, Craig Robinson, Nick Kroll, Danny McBride, Paul Rudd, James Franco, David Krumholtz, Edward Norton, Salma Hayek, Anders Holm, and the additional voices of Kelly Sheridan, Alistair Abel, Ian James Corlett, Michael Dangerfield, Marika Hendrickse, Michael Dobson, Brian Dobson, Nicole Oliver, Vincent Tong, and Samuel Vincent. Sausage Party has been very well known for being the first CGI animated film to be rated R and released to theaters worldwide. It also has its fair share of positive reviews from critics to fans alike. And from what I've been hearing about this film, the general consensus was mostly positive as people praised it for its off-the-wall, off-kilter, yet very entertaining nature, and the fact that it starred the likes of James Franco, Seth Rogen, and Jonah Hill was yet another reason why I had to go into this film, because these gentlemen have been very well known for starring in a fair share of irreverent comedies, with This Is the End being my personal favorite. And I've been hearing that there was a lot of hype, mostly positive feedback coming in left and right for this film. So I basically went into it not really expecting anything, but wasn't really so sure if I was going to be entertained by this film or not. So the big question is, did this film hold up to the hype or did it not at all? Let's find out. Story-wise, this really was entertaining and it was really funny without being mean-spirited. That's just the short answer. The film does start off almost like a typical Disney animated film would, with a musical number, with all the foodstuffs and all the products singing to welcome the day and welcome all the customers so that they can be traveling themselves to the other world where they can feel free to be what they want to be and just know in their hearts that the humans of whom they worship as gods will definitely be there to take great care of them and to be always there for them. You could definitely tell that this film really knows how to play with the different tropes a lot of people associate with the typical animated films. From some of the animated musical numbers from Disney to the relatable characters that we would usually find in Pixar to DreamWorks' tendency to make a lot of pop culture references to the irreverent and off-the-wall humor of South Park, Family Guy, and Ren and Stimpy to the very witty dialogue that we would usually expect from The Simpsons or King of the Hill. You can definitely tell that the creators of this film were inspired by all of these tropes and at the same time also took inspiration from Toy Story's concepts and put them all together in a blender and made it their own, yet had a lot of inspiration from all of these predecessors. And from what I can tell from Sausage Party, and I'm sure a lot of people will also notice this, that Sausage Party is basically Toy Story's more irreverent, off-the-wall, off-kilter, insane cousin, as what I could see through this film. It really does go out of its way to be as kind of crude and at the same time just so balls to the wall as possible. Heck, the film makes it very clear that this animated film is not intended for the little kids, but mostly for an older audience, as we hear characters swear left and right. Heck, the entire thing even does start with one of the sausages swearing, and it's basically our designated hero, Frank. Yes, the cursing does tend to be egregious and at the same time a little bit forced from time to time, but despite that, it can still be very quotable. And even though this film has a very irreverent and very off-kilter nature, you still cannot deny how smart this film can be. This film also tackles faith versus reasoning, racial stereotypes, and just a lot of human stereotypes that we would usually associate when it comes to any human drama without feeling overwrought nor mean-spirited. There is just a great amount of humor, quotability, and just a lot of hyperactivity, which makes this film really interesting in its own way, and the positives more than outweigh the negatives of this film. So even though I have some issues with the excessive cursing and would have loved for them to trim down the cursing a little bit, I still have to give this film a whole lot of credit for its hyperactive nature and the fact that it never left me bored, as it really knew how to take advantage of its 89-minute runtime and just have a lot of fun with it, while at the same time being smart and at the same time just have a lot of fun without being mean-spirited, nor too overwrought, nor too cruel to its viewers. It treats us very well, and the ride was a very fun ride from beginning to end. I was never left bored, nor did I feel sleepy, and even though some of the story's perspectives can jump from character to character, it is still a very well-woven story, with each character getting a sense of the spotlight and having a fair share of development, which really does make the story all the more fleshed out and all the more interesting. The animation is really vibrant and manages to make a great use of its cartoonish, hyperactive nature. Sure, I'm not really a fan of a lot of the character designs, and yes, the Potatoes character design really does creep me out, and it might give me nightmares, only for a little bit, because look at it. It's got eyes everywhere, and there are times I feel a bit freaked out from how it looks. But nonetheless, it's still vibrant and uses the hyperactive nature of this film to such a great extent. And what's also noticeable about the animation is that it manages to make a great use of the color palettes in terms of the perspectives of the humans and the perspectives of the foodstuffs and the products. Now, when you go to the human's perspective, it is all in a grayish, dim color palette. But then when you go to the foodstuffs and the products, you see that everything is a lot more vibrant, brighter, and in general, more colorful. And what's also interesting is that there is one scene where 2D animation is used. So even though I'm not a major fan of the character designs, as cartoonish and absolutely weird as they look, I still have to give it loads of credit for really making a great use of its animation, whether it be the drug tripping scenes or some of the montages, or even that very wonderful musical number, which I will gladly get to when I talk about the music. It still is something that is very exciting and just so eye-popping in its own special way, and it really knows how to just have a lot of fun with it. And there's also one scene that I would really love to give a huge shout out to, and that is after we see Honey Mustard's kamikaze, we see all the carts crashing around each other and all the foodstuffs falling down, and we see something that is almost akin to Silent Hill. I can definitely tell that there are some people who are quite familiar with the Silent Hill franchise, and it really knows how to make a great use of that reference wonderfully. The music is absolutely really well done, and you really have to give loads of kudos to someone as legendary as Alan Menken and Christopher Leonard's, even though I haven't really heard the latter's name. I've mostly heard a lot about Alan Menken, and he wrote a lot of great music for a lot of some of the greatest films of all time, mostly animated. The opening number really deserves a lot of credit, as it does make me feel like I was watching a traditional animated musical, and I almost thought it was going to go that route. Heck, it really does lampoon it wonderfully with such abandon and with such charm. I was just really enthralled with it that it almost became an earworm for me. That is just how memorable the music really is. Yes, even though there were some pieces of music that didn't really mesh well with some of the scenes, I still have to give loads of credit to these guys for really composing some really wonderful music and for even fitting in some pieces of music from very popular genres, and even the likes of George Michael with Wake Me Up Before You Go Go being one of my favorite tunes. So, not gonna mince words here, the music is really, really great as it really does complement the hyperactive, fun, and almost ludicrous nature of the entire film. The characters were really entertaining. Frank is basically our designated hero. Sure, there may not be anything that's too special about him, but he's not a boring character. He proves himself to be rather interesting in terms of his want for the big answers and to really search for the truth here and there. And at times, he does doubt that there is a true higher power in this world, which makes his character a lot more interesting and really does make him very enthralling as a character. Sure, he may not be the deepest character ever, but he really knows how to play his role really well as the designated hero, as he really knows how to move the plot along. Brenda Bunsen does start off as a sarcastic tsundere, but throughout the film, she warms up to Frank to the point where she proclaims that Frank is her boyfriend. Sure, she may not be the deepest character, nor is she the most original, but she's still very entertaining and she has some very wonderful quirks that make her just a lot of fun. Like, for example, every time she gets nervous, she tends to burst into song, which makes me just have a smile in my heart and in my face, just to have that quirk burst out from our dear friend Brenda Bunsen. Barry is probably the most relatable character out of all the cast of characters because he's basically seen as the oddball character, and I almost wanted him to be the main character of the entire film, mostly because he basically sticks out like a sore thumb compared to his sausage buddies, who are longer and sleeker, but he being on the short and pudgy side and basically a lot more of like the boy next door. He is basically someone who might end up sticking out like a sore thumb and gets ridiculed by it, but we do see that he is a character who tries to prove himself very well to himself that he is a lot more than what he is. And he is definitely a very great character in his own right, that it makes me wish that he were the main character of this film. Who knows, maybe he might get a spin-off one of these days. Carl is basically like the big brother figure to Barry, almost like how Frank is as well. And the relationship that Barry and Carl have is basically like siblings, Carl being the supportive, older, more experienced brother, and Barry being the younger, sweet-looking, and very childlike younger brother. So you could definitely see a great amount of character dynamics between the two. Then we go to Firewater, Twink, and Mr. Grits, who are basically the designated mentors of the entire story. And what's very interesting about these three mentor figures is that they represent minorities, with Firewater being on the Native American side, Mr. Grits representing the African Americans, and Twink being the flamboyant gay stereotype. But they play their roles very well as the mentors, and they really have a certain presence on screen that they really know how to bounce off of each other. What with Firewater's stern and serious nature, to Mr. Grits's more impassioned nature, and Twink's sweet, innocent, yet somewhat of a very interesting nature that makes him a lot more than he is as a character. These three really know how to bounce off of each other wonderfully, and they have really superb dynamics. Then we go to Douche, who starts off the film acting like a big shot high school jock slash frat boy, thinking that he is the big shot of the entire campus, thinking that he is the macho man and all that stuff, until the chaos happens and his nozzle gets badly bent, and when you see him acting all bloodthirsty, you know that you would definitely shit on your pants and just feel intimidated by this character. He's almost like Gaston from Beauty and the Beast, but unlike Gaston, Douche is basically a lot more loud, and he just ends up going all out in terms of his machismo, which makes him all the more interesting, yet all the more frightening, especially when he manages to get some juice and drinks, thus pumping up his overall energy, and at the same time pumping up his overall thirst for blood. And it does make him very frightening as a character. Now, on the surface, you might think that Darren might come off as a bland character, but he's basically a typical 20-something-year-old guy who pretty much hates his job and basically wants to do the countdown of when he's going to get paid. Yes, there may not be anything great or unique about him, but he serves his purpose well in the story, and he's basically the one who also moves the plot along. We go to Honey Mustard, who serves as the driving force of the film, stating that the human world is not what the foodstuffs and the products really see the world to be. Then we also go to Gum, who is also a very hilarious character, mostly because he is a straight-up reference to Stephen Hawking, which makes him even more endearing and all the more hilarious. And lest we forget about Kareem and Sammy. Kareem is basically a very impassioned character, while Sammy basically tries to be as pacifistic as possible, and they really bounce off of each other wonderfully. Teresa del Taco, at the first glance, you might think she is basically a throwaway character because she is a stereotypical, saucy, spicy Latina who happens to have very strong lesbian feelings for Brenda. But if you look beyond the surface, she's actually a very entertaining character who has her own set of strengths and is very much an impassioned and a very true friend to all the characters on screen. So overall, the characters are very entertaining. Some of them may not always have some unique traits, but they're nonetheless very wonderful to witness and just have a lot of fun with, especially the druggie. Yes, his role in the entire shebang may be kind of short, but he certainly has some very funny moments, and the voice acting is just very superb. Seth Rogen really knows how to play the designated hero trope of Frank really, really well, making him a very believable character, and nonetheless fills his role very well. Kristen Wiig really knows how to portray some of the tsundere and sarcastic natures of Brenda really, really well, and she really knows how to use a great, magnificent use of those pipes whenever she bursts into song. It makes me think that she should definitely do some more Broadway musicals one of these days. Michael Cera, despite the fact that he is quite well known for being typecasted in a lot of guy next door roles and a lot of sweet and very unsuspecting young men, really knows how to play that typecast wonderfully and make Barry a very believable character and someone who's just a lot more fleshed out than what we give him credit for. He gives Barry his life and energy and just makes him a character I definitely rooted for. Jonah Hill really does know how to portray Carl's big brother nature wonderfully, and he makes Carl a very believable character. James Franco, even though he had a very thankless role as the druggie, really knew how to portray the overall spaced out nature of this character, which should be no surprise as James Franco knows how to portray very interesting characters who may not be too likable, but nonetheless have a sense of charm and likability to them that you can't help but really feel immersed in whatever he has to go through. Bill Hader really knows how to embody Firewater's wise mentor personality and even that of El Guaco's hilarious personality, and he's definitely a very versatile performer. Scott Diggs Underwood really knows how to embody Twink's flamboyant persona and even Gum's Stephen Hawking-like persona, and does them with such believability that it just makes me feel so enthralled at his performance. Craig Robinson really knows how to give Mr. Grits his impassioned nature, and at the same time you really can't help but root for this character and just have a lot of fun with him. Edward Norton really gives Sammy his sympathetic and kind-hearted nature in such a believable manner. David Krumholtz gives Kareem his strong and impassioned personality with such flair and vivacity. Salma Hayek gives Teresa her spicy and passionate personality with the best of her abilities. And here's another interesting tidbit. Salma Hayek also played another character named Teresa, but this was basically a telenovela in the 1980s, which essentially skyrocketed her fame as an actress. Quite interesting to know that. And with this character, she definitely knew how to give Teresa del Taco her passionate, fearless, and overall fun nature. Then you go to Nick Kroll, who gives Douche his frat boy, high school jock, big shot persona with such abandon and such ferocity that I just felt so enthralled with his performance, that he was just so believable as this type of character. Danny McBride really knows how to portray the fear that Honey Mustard went through in such a believable manner, yet also at the same time a pretty over-the-top nature at that. And Paul Rudd as Darren really knows how to portray the disenfranchised, disenchanted nature of this character that you can't help but feel bad for him. Anders Holm really knows how to portray Troy's big shot personality really, really well. And all the other voice actors, ranging from Kelly Sheridan to Samuel Vincent, also did very wonderful jobs in the smaller roles. So overall, Sausage Party was an absolute blast. Even though there were some things that needed a little bit of a tune-up, it's still a very wonderful film that really had me rolling on the floor with laughter. And I had a genuinely wonderful time with this wonderful animated romp. So with that said, I give Sausage Party a well-deserved 4 out of 5 stars. There were some things that needed a little bit of tweaking, but despite all that, it was still a very fun ride with characters that were a lot of fun, even though they were not the most unique of personalities. And the voice acting, ranging from big stars like James Franco, Edward Norton, Kristen Wiig, to professional voice actors like Kelly Sheridan, Samuel Vincent, and Nicole Oliver, was just so well done. And I have to give everyone from the cast to the crew to everyone in this film a whole lot of kudos for a job well done. Well, that's all for now. Be sure to tune in tomorrow for my review of Grizzly Tales for Gruesome Kids. So until then, good night, everybody.